Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of the Since I Was Young podcast here on YouTube. And joining me today is our good friend John, stepping up once again to join me in the misery that is talking about Heart of Midlothian at this moment in time. Obviously, we had a bit of a disappointment over the last few weeks, none more so than previous Thursday evening when we were defeated by Victoria Pilsen, sending us into the Europa Conference League. Which, is probably lesser of two evils from a European point of view. However, things went from bad to worse after yesterday's disappointing defeat at the hands of newly promoted Dundee United. So we will be kind of dipping into these subjects, these games, giving our thoughts and views, and just a little rundown of where we think Hearts are going at the moment and what we think could happen or needs to change. But anyway, as I say, before we get cracked in, do the usual. Subscribe to the channel, Since I Was Young podcast here on YouTube. As I say, you can find our socials in the description below. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of the things. We're across all of them, so please feel free to join us over there and give us your thoughts on this episode and any previous ones if there's anything else that you'd like to tell us about. Anyway, with that all out of the way, John, how are you, my man?
I'm doing okay now. If I look and sound like crap, you'll have to forgive me. I am literally fighting off the last of my third bout with COVID at the moment. So last time I joined you on the show, it was straight off a plane, straight on the show. This time it's straight out of bed and straight on the laptop to talk about the misery that comes with being a Heart of Midlothian fan in 2024. Much better than I was at the weekend, but yesterday's football didn't help that much.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you're a trooper, John, an absolute trooper. I think if I was in your shoes, I'd be remaining in my bed for the foreseeable future. The one positive is obviously we have an international break, so we can have time to switch off
Yeah, I
from
was about
Hearts for a little
uh,
while. But
I was
yeah, it's just
literally about to say, what it's a good time for right now, Aldo, an international break, because
yeah, I'll take it.
it's sorely needed. I hope that the club can, in these 2 weeks between now and the next fixture, get the work in that they have quite clearly failed to in pre-season. I don't know what they've been up to over the summer, but the lack of production, the lack of creativity, the lack of organisation at the back, the lack of any sort of heart or fight or guts, quite frankly, the lack of any accountability is embarrassing.
Yeah,
You just
no,
mentioned that they're newly promoted Dundee United. Now, Dundee United are one of the better sides that were, going to be tussling for coming back up. They are a decent side on their day, but they come to Tynecastle. They should not be winning in that fashion. Heart of Midlothian never got out of first gear, and after the first few weeks of the season, that was an entire month of August with zero competitive wins. And when you look at some of the opposition, not all of it, but some of it, that is absolutely shameful.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, thrilled to be here talking about Hearts again with you, Alan.
As always, mate, as always. But what I'll do before we dive into Dundee United, I'll kind of take us back to the Pilsen game. Obviously, we brought it back to Tynecastle with a narrow 1-0 deficit, having lost away from home thanks to a last-minute goal, which we talked about in the last episode. We gave our thoughts on that. Obviously, bringing it back to Tynecastle, having an opportunity to turn the tie around, because for all the credit that I gave to Victoria Pilsen prior to actually playing them, I thought they were incredibly ordinary. I thought they were a side that were very much there for the getting at. And,
High average. Yeah.
again, we'll speak about Dundee United later, but it certainly had parallels to that in terms of the fan base, turned up because Hearts fans will always turn up. It's what we do. It's the loyalty in us. It's how we are. But they were not rewarded with the performance on the park, I have to say. There were a few moments against Pilsen, but overall, and again, I'm not going to go through every single moment of it, but overall, as a fixture, it just felt like one of those games. And as I said, Ewan and I spoke about it last week. It almost felt like there was no pressure on us because it was like, oh, well, worst case is we get Conference League, which is where we were last year. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for your average punter in the stand to be thinking, because obviously me as the optimist that I am when it comes to Heart of Midlothian, I'm looking at it going, well, Conference League is better than no European football, but Europa League's better than that. So, if somebody had said to me at the start, you're going to end up in the Conference League, I would have said, fine, I'll take that. Obviously the financial rewards are not as much as you get in the Europa League, but the money at that level is still considerable for a club like Hearts, regardless of be it Conference or Europa. But I don't want the players to be thinking like that, and I don't want the management to be thinking like that, and I certainly hope that they weren't, because if they were, that's a problem. You want your players and your management team to be striving for the best and be that Europa League. And like I say, the game against Pilsen for me, it just came across as a game that we looked at and thought it would be great to win, but if we don't, we're in the conference anyway. That was the vibe that I got from the game itself. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't a great game of football. Like I say, Pilsen were average by the standards of previous European competitors that we've been up against, particularly at Tynecastle. They're certainly one of the worst European sides I've seen at Tynecastle for a long time. So that says something. And it was a winnable tie, even coming back 1-0 down in the disappointment of conceding right at the end. It was a winnable tie, but the way that we are right now, it almost felt like we were defeated before we'd even got going, if that makes sense. I don't know what you thought about it, if you want to just sum it up briefly for us.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you, Alan. There, coming out of Thursday, it almost feels as though the team had settled for Conference League before a ball was even kicked on Thursday night. We never got out of first gear as a team. We gave up another stupid goal from distance against a team that over the two legs were very average, as you say. And Victoria Plzeň are not a bad team by any stretch. They're one of the top teams in Czechia. So I was actually surprised by how poor they were in both legs. Ironically enough, I think the only decent performance we've seen from Hearts since the Rangers game was at Victoria away. But on Thursday night, when they didn't really turn up, they didn't really have to. We don't know if they have a second gear because Hearts never challenged them, and that is abysmal. The atmosphere at Tynecastle from the first whistle was fantastic. And like you say, the fans that showed up, as they always do, were not rewarded. And it's not the first time. And it's getting to the point where this run is taking the piss. The lack of effort from so many of these players who should be so much better, the lack of organisation in defence, the lack of creativity, the lack of an intelligent pass at times is just so frustrating. The lack of anything up top, like there is just a complete outage of like goals in this team that is just baffling. It's as baffling as it is infuriating. And the lack of a plan from Naismith to get out of it. And I've been the biggest cheerleader of Stephen Naismith that there is. But even I have to admit when things are coming off the cart, and right now the wheels are coming off the cart, he needs to fix this. I don't care how, but he needs to, and it needs to be now, because this is officially our worst run since in 46 years, I believe, to start a season. We're only three shy of without a win from the worst ever start to a season, which was in like 1920, was it 1921 or 26? So a long, long, long time ago. There's a lot of managers in recent years who've been quite maligned. Levine, Nielsen, for whatever reason. Cathro even had a better start than we have had this year. It is shameful and it's embarrassing from the caliber of player that we've signed and that we already had in this lineup that they are this bad.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, but then again, I'm not paid to figure it out. Somebody needs to figure it out. No effort, no accountability, no balls. It's not good enough.
Completely. No, I completely agree. Completely agree. And I'm gonna say it about the Europa League game, or well, yeah, the Europa League playoff game, and
yeah. Sorry, sorry to cut in there, but like to get back to the Victoria game, like you mentioned earlier, that yeah, I would have taken conference if we had qualified for conference, but we got Europa. We could have gotten into the league phase, and the money, just the money. We got like £6 million 2 years ago for being in the Europa Conference League group stages. You're looking at easily probably that and a half, if not double, just for being in a Europa League group stage, playing against some of the top teams in the world. Think about how valuable that experience would have been for these players. If only those players had been thinking that.
Yeah,
Don't they want to play
totally.
against the best players in the world? Why are you a
Yeah,
professional footballer if you're going to show up on a night like that and put in that little effort?
no, I
Cammy
completely
Devlin
agree.
gets close to a pass mark for me.
Hmm.
Craig Gordon, once again, was very solid. Not a lot he could have done on the goal. He was left completely exposed, as he has been virtually every game, time after time, by his defence.
No, I do. I agree.
Shambolic.
Yeah, it is. It
Absolutely
is, and
shambolic.
it is, and
They've
it's
left
one of
so much
those.
money on the table.
Yeah, no, completely. And like I say, it's without sort of going over old ground and stuff. It is a massive missed opportunity because to get into the Europa
Yeah,
League would have been huge for us. But anyway,
absolutely.
we have to settle for the Conference League, and I sat down and watched the Conference League draw that took the longest amount of time. Obviously, this new format for the new season with the group stage
Oh,
being
yeah.
replaced by a big league. And honestly, the draw, like, I don't know what it is, but like, I like watching the draws of the old format when you've got the four teams in the group and you draw them out in the
Yeah,
pots and all the rest of it. There's a bit of, not jeopardy, it's the wrong word, but there's a bit of kind of excitement about that going, all right, we're a pot four
yeah.
team. We're going to have three teams above us that are all going to be really good. Who are
Aye.
we going to get? The group stage draw for the Conference League and for the Europa and indeed for the Champions League. I know it's the first time they've done it with this new format, but it just seemed like nobody really knew what was going on.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've been drawn our ties, and we will face FC Heidenheim of Germany at home. We will face Omonia FC from Cyprus at home, and we will also face FC Petrocub at home. We've got some tricky away ties with AFC Copenhagen, obviously conquerors of Kilmarnock, and Cercle Bruges, another tricky tie away from home, as well as the opening tie of the Europa League, the Conference League group stages. I'm going to get it right eventually. Conference League group stages away from home. Our first tie against Dynamo Minsk, which will be
Yep.
played in Azerbaijan behind closed doors due to the ongoing conflict in that area of the world. It's when you look at those games overall, like, I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, could have been a lot worse. And going away from home to Copenhagen and to Bruges, it's going to be two brilliant trips for our fan base who,
Yep.
despite the ongoing uncertainties and doubts, our fan base will travel in their thousands because, again, as I say, it's just what we do.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's. I was reading earlier on, sort of trying to look into the clubs that we've been drawn against, and FC Heidenheim have started their league campaign with 5 straight victories in all competitions. So they're on a high right now, which is probably the last thing that we want. But yeah, playing them at home at Tynecastle, it's maybe not the worst situation, but it's underwhelming because it could have been Europa League. It really could have been.
Yeah.
But the ties
Hmm.
themselves, obviously, going away to Copenhagen, going away to Bruges as well. Who I think two sides. I think Kilmarnock played Bruges as well recently, or maybe I'm getting my wires crossed. But they certainly played Copenhagen. So if we're not looking at those games and saying, right, what did Kilmarnock do? What can we do? There's got to be some planning there. But then obviously Copenhagen will be looking at us going, well, it's another Scottish team. We played one already and we beat them. So
Yeah.
it swings and roundabouts, but I think it's quite a favourable draw. And with the new format, obviously, it's based on the number of points that you accrue over those games rather than, if you lose two, you're out or whatever. It's basically a case of you get a number of points. If you finish in the
Yeah.
top section of the group, you go into the playoff phase, or you go straight through to the round of 16 or whatever it is. And then if you finish in a certain section of the table, you have to play a playoff, and then that gets you through. So there is a possibility for us to get enough points to qualify through that. But again, maybe that's the optimist in me looking at it going, if Hearts were in a comfortable, competent, happy place, this is what I would like to see
Yeah.
happen. Obviously, right now, things are not like that. So that does dent the confidence in that slightly.
Yeah. Yeah. Aye. Absolutely. I think when you mentioned like Copenhagen and Cercle Bruges, I think Dinamo Minsk are sort of close to that as well, and Heidenheim, of course, are having a fantastic start. These are the kind of European games that we can get excited about because it's good caliber opposition that we want to test ourselves against. The problem is we don't appear to be in any fit state to be testing ourselves against anyone at the moment. Like I kind of feel as though I feel as if it's just going to be piling misery on misery unless things change very quickly. It's very hard for me to see us getting much out of that. Um, sure enough, like I fancy us to beat Petrocub, who are fourth in the Moldovan league. I fancy us to get all 3 points against them. But yeah, I'm finding it hard to get enthused about the Europa Conference League, mate. If I'm honest,
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
fair.
like the failure to get out of first gear against FC Victoria Pilsen on Thursday is emblematic of the lack of ambition that this team has shown so far this summer. They're still on their holidays, it feels like, and guys, we've been back for 6 weeks. We talked about it previously. We were concerned that we hadn't played enough friendlies. We clearly hadn't. We haven't done much of anything, it seems like, other than have a piss up in Spain. We don't
Mm-hmm.
seem to have a plan. Presumably, there's somebody still in the backroom staff at Hearts that is scouting opposition and putting together some sort of tactical strategy ahead of games. I'm not seeing it though. I'm not seeing what the plan is. I'm not seeing what the Hearts stamp is. What we called Nazy Ball appears to have vanished into the ether. Like you said to me, just yesterday, you were like Nazy Ball. It's disappeared, and it has.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not playing any of that good football. Nothing they were doing right last year that got us third place is being done. So it's difficult for me to get enthusiastic about going to Copenhagen and potentially getting points, or going to Minsk, sorry, and potentially getting points, facing Cercle Bruges and Copenhagen and getting anything out of it. We'll be lucky to qualify for the playoff, I think, and that's
Yeah.
annoying to say because we have drawn a very generous group, I think, in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
On
Yeah.
any kind of normal year, like if we were actually in a position where we're performing to our actual talent, but we're not. No one is. Shankland is missing in action. Um,
Well,
the fact that he is playing at the centre circle for 80 of the 90 minutes is not helping matters, and we don't
no.
have anything else up front. The only other option that looks lively up front is Jan Danda, and he's been on the bench the vast majority of his Hearts career so far. Kenneth Vargas is putting in a lot of effort. I'll give him that, but he's not performing all that well. Like his
Yeah.
touches, his decision making, his final product aren't there. So yeah, full marks for effort, Vargas on occasion, but not much in terms of delivery.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
I'm
I
not.
think
This is an angry John podcast today. Unfortunately, I'm not in the
it's
mood for Hearts nonsense at the moment.
it's entirely fair
Yeah.
indeed. As I say, it's to me maybe it's just the optimistic head that I'm looking at it going, it's
Mm.
possible. And with the new format, I think the new format is kind of set up to help the sides at the sort of lesser end of it. So hopefully that can be us, and hopefully we can pick up some points. And I mean, who knows? We don't know where we're going to be in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Things could change behind the scenes or in dugout. We just don't know. We'll touch
Yep.
on that as we progress. But yeah, we'll see. As I say, the Conference League, looking forward to it, and our fans will travel because it's just the way that they are and it's the nature they have. I've already seen lots of people talking about booking flights to Copenhagen, booking flights to Bruges, despite then going on a rant about recent form and recent situations. But we're for as much as Hearts fans are hard to please, or we're demanding, I think is probably the best way of putting it, because we are a demanding fan base, and Joel Sked summed
Of
it up
course.
perfectly in a tweet that I saw. Hearts fans are a very demanding fan base, but we are actually relatively easy to please when you boil it down. You just want a team that shows everything on the pitch, gives 100%,
Absolutely. Yeah.
has obviously ability, but has a bit of fight and a bit of heart without, trying to bam that up too much. But at the moment, we're just not seeing that. And that kind of continued as we went on to Sunday's tie against Dundee United. So yes, we then obviously fast forward to Sunday where we took on Dundee United in a game that Stephen Naismith suggested after the Pilsen game that we needed to get a win from in his post-match interview that he gave after Pilsen. Obviously, Dundee United, it was a massive, massive game for us, billed as the foundation of Hearts Day as well. We have one every year to celebrate the fans and the contribution that the fans make to the football club with their monthly donations, and obviously keeping the club in the position where it currently is. So obviously I went along to the game. I spent the entirety of Saturday trying to get tickets for Oasis and failed miserably. Ended up with a free ticket to Tynecastle on Sunday, which made me just as miserable. Just before I sort of hand it over to yourself, obviously having watched it and been there, Naismith changed the system for the game. He went to a back four, which I think we've been crying out for weeks. And he changed some personnel. We had a start in defence for Craig Halkett alongside Frankie Kent. He played Stephen Kingsley at right back, which I thought was an interesting one. Taylor being not even on the bench, another interesting one. I'm not sure if he was carrying a knock or if it was a case of, he's low in confidence, he needs to come out. There were also a couple of tweaks here and there. We had George Grant playing as well as Boateng and Spittle. He had Oda starting with Shankland and Vargas leading the line as well. So a few changes made to the lineup, and I think it was needed. I think people were sort of obviously, understandably and quite rightly so, not entirely happy with what they've been seeing in recent weeks. So the first sort of point I want to make about Naismith and his formation changes and things, he's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't, I think is the one sort of grain of defence that I'll give him. He played this back three with the two wing backs, which clearly works in some scenarios, but not in enough scenarios for us to be successful with it. And then he changes it.
Not in any so far this year.
Well, yeah, it worked last year. Maybe it's the players.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I say, that there's an element of whatever system he plays, it seems at the moment anyway, that it's just not happening for him and for the players. There's obviously reasons as to why, which we'll get into. But I went along to Tynecastle again in my blind optimistic state, thinking, right, this is the day, we're going to get a win. We're going to turn it round. I don't care how we win. If somebody had offered me a 1-0 scrappy win with the ball going in off Liam Boyce's arse, I would have taken it. Genuinely, that was the vibe I had. I did not care. I just wanted to win. And as the game started, I thought we actually looked okay. I thought, right, we're playing some decent football here. We're passing it forward. We're moving it. We're finding people. We didn't create a great deal, which is not news to anyone. But I felt like in the opening sort of 15, 20 minutes, I thought, right, I can see what is happening here. Like this system looks balanced. There's something about it that works. And then the typical frustration came from the stands at the fact that nothing was happening. And that translated onto the pitch. And to be fair to Dundee United, they created very little as well because they didn't need to. The game plan for any away side coming to Tynecastle at the moment is very simple and straightforward. Sit in, defend, frustrate them, frustrate the crowd, and they'll beat themselves. And that sort of we spoke about the Pilsen game. I felt like a large part of that was we beat ourselves in that game as well. And the Dundee United game, the way it unfolded, it was more of that. We beat ourselves, and the players, you could see when things just weren't working, the players were just, it was almost like they didn't know what to do, they didn't know how to react. And that is a worry for me. And that I put that at the bed of, or at the feet of Stephen Naismith to an extent. However, I'm not talking about new players here. I'm not talking about a Blair Spittle, who I didn't think was terrible, but I've still yet to see enough that makes me think he's a Hearts player. I hope I'm wrong by the end of the season. But I'm talking about players that have been around the club for a while now. George Grant has been a Hearts player for a little while. And yes, he was very good. I thought he was one of the better players in yesterday's game. Oda was starting, and it was a rare start for him. And I love Oda. Everybody knows that listens and watches this regularly, how much I adore Yutaro Oda. But even I was getting frustrated with him. But there's lots of different sides of it, because are we playing to these players' strengths? It doesn't seem like we are. That's the issue for me. And there were players, like I say, players that just didn't do it. They didn't seem to just be up for it. And that is a real worry for me, especially when Stephen Naismith was talking about how important getting a win was. The players, again, just didn't look like they wanted it. And, going back to the fact, obviously, it was Foundation of Hearts Day. It was a day to celebrate the supporters. It should have been, and maybe this is me looking at it from a totally basic viewpoint, but to me, that's the easiest team talk that Stephen Naismith needs to give. This day is about the fans. This day is Foundation of Hearts Day. These fans some people pay hundreds of pounds every month into that football club because they love it. It's what gets them going at the weekend. It's some people see it, a Saturday game at Tynecastle or a Sunday game at Tynecastle. That's what gets me through the week. You know, we love the football club. And Naismith, and I don't know, obviously, we're not privy to what was said. But if I'm in his shoes, I'm saying to every single player, right, this is a reset. Today is the day we have to get going because it will be toxic if not. And me sitting in the stand watching that game, I can tell you, and I'm not going to obviously reveal who it was because, then it's a whole thing, but there was somebody a few rows behind me 5 minutes into the game. They were shouting, "This is fucking unacceptable. This is not good enough. What are we doing?" And that's me sitting here saying in the first 20 minutes, I actually thought we weren't that bad. But that voice
Yeah,
wasn't the only
yeah,
one. It wasn't the only one that I heard. And that,
yeah,
again, that concerns me because when I'm sitting watching these games, and, you and I went to the pre-season friendly, um, and you hear people saying things and you go, "Oh, it's pre-season, get over it."
yeah,
In that Dundee United game, as the game went on, and I'm an optimist, I want to see Hearts do the best that they can. As the game against Dundee United went on, I found myself agreeing with these people more and more, and that's not me. And I just felt, do you know what? You're actually right. Like, what are we doing here? Like, as I say, the first 15, 20 minutes, I thought we were good, or as good as we have been in recent weeks. But it just tailed off so quickly. And the rest of the game, you just knew how it was going to go. Like, I highlighted George Grant as a player that I thought actually put in a decent shift and did relatively well. I'll say the same to Penrice, who I think of our new players certainly looks like one of the ones. He's not an Alex Cochrane by any stretch, but he looks like a player that wants to prove that he's good enough to play for us because he's come
yeah.
from Livingston, obviously a lower level. Well, I'll say a lower level.
Mhm.
Thankfully, they are a lower level now because they're in the Championship, but you can't get much lower than us in the Premiership at the moment. But
Yeah,
Penrice to me looks like a player that wants to prove a point and say, right, I've been brought to this club. I want to show that I'm good enough to play for it. And obviously, with Salazar being brought in as well as the exotic left back recruit, Penrice is probably looking at him going, "Yeah, you might be all right, but I'm here and I'm in charge of this left back position. It's mine. You have to get it off me." And to be fair, I thought he looked very good. I thought George Grant, as I said, put in a shift. I thought, who else did? Boateng. Boateng, in my view, continues to prove to me that he is a very, very, very capable midfielder. Again, he's another one that seems to have divided opinion in the same way that Benny did. It's almost like people don't understand what that role is meant to do.
yeah,
Because Cammy Devlin got slated for doing similar things when he played in that role. Then it was Benny's turn, and now it's Boateng's turn. But it is what it is. I thought Boateng had a very good day. The issue was he was a one-man midfield at points, and there was just no outball for him. So he had to go backwards, which obviously we all know when a backwards pass is made at Tynecastle, it's like the end of the world. And, nobody wants to see that,
yeah,
which is entirely fair. But yeah, there's lots of sort of takeaways I can have from the Dundee United game. But the way I'll put it, at halftime, I was sat there thinking, right, do you know what? There's some good signs there. There's some good signs. We're getting into decent positions, but we're just failing to make that final pass. And you touched on it earlier about a lack of creativity, a lack of vision. And I think that's spot on. I don't know what it is. And again, like I say, I can't say it's new players because it's affecting everyone. None more so than our captain, who I will talk about shortly. Because yeah, it's the problems are
Let
there
me
to.
stop you for a sec. Let me stop you for a sec. The true captain of Heart of Midlothian Football Club is Craig Gordon. That armband better be on Gordon's arm when the international break is over. That's all I'm saying. Please continue.
Yeah, no, I knew you'd chime in with that at some point. As I say, when I saw
It's
Craig
not
Gordon's
just
name,
it's not just because I'm so obsessive about Craig. It's the lack of goals. Fine, like sometimes strikers take a while to get going, but it's the lack of looking like he can be arsed. The lack of physical. He looks out of shape, and it's like, mate, you were at the Euros.
mhm, I'm with
He's
you.
had an active summer. How can he be that out of shape? How can he be that slow?
Yep.
And it's not all entirely on Shankland. He's ended up in the same situation that he ended up in the later part of Nielsen's time in charge, where because there's zero creativity in the midfield,
Yeah.
he is tracking back, trying to do it all himself. And I don't know whether he's taken that upon himself or whether that's what he's been told to do in those situations, but it is not working. So many times, and I only watched the replay today. I spent yesterday in bed. I sort of passively listened to some of the game. Laurie got me through some of my COVID recovery, as he's always there for me, so he is. And so I didn't see it until this morning. And when I was watching it, I was like, I lost count of how many times Kingsley or Oda or Penrice tried to whip a ball into the box, and there was no one in a Hearts shirt there. And it's like, one, why is there no one there? And two, why are they not seeing that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The
Yeah.
biggest thing for me, that I want to say about it is that as the game went on, we were doing the same things over and over again. It was backwards and
Yeah.
sideways between the defenders, backways and sideways, and then you'd get Penrice whipping a ball down the line looking for a winger that wasn't there. You'd get Frankie Kent trying a diagonal pass out to Oda when, I love Oda, but he's not going to win a ball in the air up against a big physical Dundee United defender.
He
Dundee
needs through
United,
balls down the flank rather than across.
Completely. And to be fair, as the game went on, there were a few moments where the ball was getting to him in those positions, and there was one moment where he gets the ball in a position and then cuts back inside, and everybody's going, take it down the line. Why are you cutting back inside to where the defenders are? And
that move went absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, and it does. It all adds up to just poor decision making in that final third.
100%.
And as much as we're talking about Naismith and we're talking about the future and all the rest of it, the players have to take some responsibility. They have to be. And this is where I'll kind of segue into my point about Shankland. I adore Lawrence Shankland, and I don't want anyone to question that, because I absolutely adore the man. I know back in the early days when we did an episode when we were being linked with Lawrence Shankland, I said I didn't want him. I did not want him at this football club, because at that point, I need to remind people, because it makes me look stupid now if I say it without context. At that point, we were being quoted as having to pay £1 million for him.
Yeah.
And I was like, as good as he is, he's not worth £1 million.
Upward of 600k at least, we were getting a lot of crazy figures. We're getting bandied around. I think Joe Savage, one of his best pieces of business he ever did as sporting director at Hearts, was to bring that fee down to where it was, because we've more than gotten our money's worth for sure. I think I think they're going to want you to have Shankland's goal total tattooed on your arm, or even your forehead or something like that.
If I was a betting man, I would put some sort of wager on it, and I'll say at the end of the season I would do that, but absolutely not. But my point about Lawrence Shankland that I want to make, and I'm sure there's people that will agree, people will disagree. You mentioned it there about the captain's armband and things. Shankland has had a summer where he's gone to the Euros, and there's been a lot of pressure around him, a lot of press saying this guy's been banging goals in for Hearts, he should be starting for his country. He goes to the Euros and Steve Clarke doesn't give him a sniff until the last 5 minutes in games or whatever. That's up to Steve Clarke. That's on him. That's fine. I'm brushing over that because it's Scotland and I'm not that arsed. He then comes back to Hearts, and obviously all summer long you have all the speculation about Rangers, you have all that nonsense flying around. Will he stay? Will he go? Is there a contract? Is there not? And it's been going on for a long time. And he's had that on his shoulders for a while, and he's done well to avoid it, ignore it. And when he's been asked in press conferences and such, he just brushes it off and says, I'm enjoying my time at Hearts, I'm doing all right, I'm scoring goals, this is a good thing. What I saw from Lawrence Shankland yesterday was a shambolic showing from a captain. And again, I don't know the sort of captain that Lawrence Shankland is. He doesn't come across as the sort that's going to grab you by the scruff of the neck and shout at you on the pitch if you do something wrong. He comes across as a sort of captain that leads by example, and his goals make him confident, and that breeds through the team, which is absolutely fine, because there's plenty like that. I'm an Arsenal man. Our captain is exactly the same. Martin Odegaard, he's not a shouter. He's not going to drag you by the scruff of the neck and tell you you're not good enough.
Yeah.
He leads by example from his performances, and Shankland seems to do that too.
Yeah. Although Shankland is more Lorenzo Pellegrini than Martin Odegaard at the moment, in the sense that he's virtually a mirage.
Yeah, fair. I think that's your Italian football know-how coming through.
Yeah. As a Roma fan, I'm a Roma and Hearts fan, and it feels like I'm watching different coats of paint on the same turd each week at the moment. It's so frustrating.
But yeah, as I say, there was a moment in the game where the ball broke down. I'm sure it was Penrice or something happened. And I looked at Lawrence Shankland, and he's throwing his arms up like a toddler, throwing a tantrum. And I'm like, you are the captain. Like, what are you doing to inspire these players? What are you doing to say that wasn't good enough? But you know what? The idea was good. Just do it again, but do it better. Because the ball, like the play that was coming through, didn't actually look that bad. It looked quite a promising move. And then it breaks down, and you're thinking, right, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just wasn't executed well enough. So you go over and you tell them, just keep doing that, and one will come off. Keep doing that, and we'll get in. He didn't. He threw his arms up like a toddler, had a little tantrum, puffed his cheeks out, and then ran off. And you're like, that's the captain of this football club. Like, I don't know. And maybe after the game, they went back to the dressing room and all shouted at each other and had a clear the air conversation or whatever. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. But to me, it was a massive, massive showing of the unrest in the players at the moment. If that's the captain, that's an issue. Then to lead on to that, the next thing I'll point out before I give it to you, I watched Stephen Naismith on the touchline. I watched him barking instructions at people. I watched him shouting at them, trying to get them to do things. And there were genuine moments, and I don't know. I'm going to give the players the benefit of the doubt and say maybe they just didn't hear it. I don't think that's the case. But Stephen Naismith was shouting instructions that were almost actively being ignored by his players. Yeah. And again, if that's the case, that's not a good look either, because are they playing for him? Have they got fed up with the constant changes and the constant tactical tweaks? And, the other point, he takes off George Grant, who was having a perfectly good game. That decision got booed as George Grant went off. He takes off Penrice, who, again, had a good game. And I know Penrice has had an operation in the summer and hasn't had a full preseason and all the rest of it. So he's managing his minutes, and I get that. That's fine.
He's had the minutes by now, though, surely. Yeah, he's had the minutes by now.
That's what
and he seems absolutely fine.
Yeah,
it's not like he's struggling.
No, and the point, you made a point earlier about Jan Danda sitting on the bench. I did read something recently that he's apparently been taking painkilling injections to just play, because I think he's been carrying a wee knock across the summer. So that may have something to do with it. But I'm of that old school view of if you're fit enough to sit on the bench, you're fit enough to play. But that's another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But again, to go back to the Dundee United game, because I feel like I've gone on a little bit of a rant tangent, if you will, in this therapy session. The longer the game went, the more predictable it became. We did the same moves over and over and over again, and they weren't working. Nothing was happening. Nobody was finding anything. There was no spark from anywhere. And we just continued the same patterns of play, hoping that they would work. And you're like, no, it's not. That's not working. Like, try something else. What is the alternative game plan? What do they do? Stephen Naismith was out barking at players on the touchline, and then he'd go sit down in the dugout, speak to his coaching staff, look at their wee monitor, and have a wee chat amongst themselves.
Right.
And it's like, what are you doing? Like, it's really, really frustrating, because we have a good group of players, and we've brought in new players in this summer window. Personally, I think we've done too much business, but that's just me. I can see why they've done the business that they've done. But we have a good team, and this team has been invested in. Stephen Naismith has been given a lot of money. I know people will go, oh, we've not spent, it's ridiculous that our top signing is still Mirsad Bezlija from years ago. These players have cost money. We've agreed a 6-figure fee with Taylor's club to get a loan. We've probably agreed the same with Salazar to get a loan for him. Yes, there were pre-contracts for Danda, Penrice, and Spittle, but that still would have been money. Do you know what I mean? There's wages there. There's signing on fees and all the rest of it. I mean, you and I, as Football Manager players, know that these things, they're never free. And it's a game, but it also mirrors reality.
It does,
so That to me, I'm looking at this team and I'm going, what is Stephen Naismith doing? What is his plan for this team? Because the minute that Dundee United goal went in, the stands emptied, the atmosphere flipped completely. And I like to think I'm a positive, optimistic Jambo. I like to think I'm one of these guys that goes, give it time. I found myself looking at the clock from the 80th minute going, I could just leave now. I live 10 minutes along the road from Tynecastle. I could be back home having a cup of tea in 15 minutes and forgetting that this happened. But I didn't leave because I'm not that sort of person. Plus, the ticket was given to me by a family friend, and I wasn't going to do that. So that's the whole thing. But I found myself thinking, this is not good enough. Something needs to happen. And I didn't go into Tynecastle thinking that on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, yeah, very valuable insights. I think they're given that you were actually at the game. I've always been of the mindset that it's never acceptable to boo and the players off the park or to leave early. The
Yeah,
fact that I pay as much for my travel to games as I do for the ticket helps
yeah,
me stick around if that's in fairness. But I'm finding myself increasingly understanding of the folks who do because it's absolutely shambolic. The figure that jumped out to me when I was watching the replay earlier today there was 17.5 million, which is the amount of money that the Foundation of Hearts has received in pledges to the club since it opened. £17.5 million of fans' money has been pumped into this club. Yesterday was the day to celebrate that. The only acceptable way to celebrate that was to give us the same equivalent effort back, and it did not happen. You mentioned the tweaks of the tactics and stuff, and yet Naismith is not in any way, shape, or form free of blame. Ultimately, he's the guy who's tasked with figuring it out. I feel like it's kind of a chicken and egg situation or a catch-22 that he's in because he's in this quandary of none of his players are doing anything that he's asking them to do, and so he has to change something. It just so happens that it looks like he's getting it wrong when he is changing it. Like his backup plan doesn't fit the players. Ultimately, I think the system he's trying to play is what ultimately fits the players. They just aren't performing their function. And so and yesterday, like you said, like I would even go further. I would say the first half was not awful. Like the first half was pretty decent. We looked like if either side was going to take it, it looked like we would. We just needed to find that cutting edge and that wee bit of creativity in the final third. We didn't manage to do that, and I was like, but you know what? It's a step up from Pulgen, and it's a step up from certainly Phil Park a week earlier. Um,
absolutely.
if we can keep playing with this kind of energy level, fine. But after half time, they just completely seem to lose interest. Um, and it just is it's inexcusable. It's absolutely inexcusable. Um, the fact that we looked like we're playing like a 4-3-3 sort of system rather than the usual 4-2-3-1 for the most part of the game, uh, all well and good. But like you said, it seemed like Malachi Boateng was the only person that was actually in midfield, and it seems like anytime a team tries to counter against Hearts this season, they have a kind of there's like a delay between their brains and their bodies. Like when a counter attack starts against Hearts, they kind of I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Green Mile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
You know the scene where William Wharton is like he's like because he's been like sedated. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like Hearts are like react to counter attacks like that. This
True.
season, it's like I don't know how many times average players have just waltzed through the entire Hearts midfield and then caught the defence like way too far up the park. And then we don't press either. So I don't know why we're that far up. We have not seen Hearts press properly in this entire season. Like
Yeah,
both the Pulgen goal on Thursday and the goal that Dundee United scored yesterday were the result of Hearts defenders just standing around, not pressing anybody.
no, completely,
And so
completely agree.
there's very little that the goalkeeper can do when a shot's placed that well. And the reason
Yeah,
it's placed that well is because of how much time we're giving them on the ball on the edge of the area. It's shambolic. It's absolutely shameful. And like you say, it's not new players. Kent's there. Kingsley's there. Halkett was there. Penrice is the only one out of the back four that put in any sort of an effort. And I don't know why Stephen Kingsley is being played at right back. It
I
doesn't
know,
work.
I know, I
It
know,
just doesn't work. It has
I
never
know.
worked. He's a
Well,
decent defender, but
yeah,
you need to look at it in terms of right. You need a right-footed right back to be able to whip the ball up the park that way, or to diagonally hit the ball. If your right back's left-footed, your diagonals are going to end up in like the back end of the wheat field,
yeah,
and anything you try to whip
completely.
is likely going to end up getting cut off by the opposition. It's
No,
not
I
rocket
know.
science.
No, it's not.
It's just, and you were talking about Shankland, and I was very frustrated with Lawrence Shankland in yesterday's game when I was watching it earlier. No effort whatsoever. Like, he's tracking back. He's doing very little when he's tracking back. He's moaning and huffing and stuff. And like you said, that's your captain. That's not the way a captain's supposed to act.
No, no.
You know,
And
and I find that this season on Hearts TV, your videos are opening up with the famous John Cumming quote, "Blood doesn't show on a maroon jersey." And it's plastered all over Tynecastle. And it's about time that these players actually read it and actually have a rethink and think, what does that actually mean? And what he meant by that was 100% commitment, 100% effort all of the time. And like you say, we're a hard fan base to to we're an easy fan base to please. You know, we're harsh on players, but it doesn't take much to get us on side. All we want you to
yeah,
do is play football, give 100%, try and create some goals, win football matches, and make sure that we are up there among the 3 or 4 top players in Scotland where we should be. And the fact that on Foundation of Hearts Day, which is supposed to be a celebration of the absolutely incredible strides that this club has taken in the last decade because of the fans, because of the amount of money that the fans have put in, £17.5 million of fans' own money has been donated to the club, quite aside from sponsorship deals, ticket sales, player sales, competition bonuses. It's an outrageous amount of money that people have put
yeah,
in, and they deserve something back for that. They deserve equivalent effort. Nothing of
completely,
the sort. The second half
completely agree.
yesterday was just toothless as
Yeah,
usual.
yeah.
And
No, I
then,
totally agree with you. I totally agree with you, John.
uh,
Sorry, just
and then
to
you,
kind of
yeah,
no, you
and then I
crack on.
watched Stephen Naismith's post-match comments as well. And the first question he was asked is, "Can you put your finger on what's wrong?" And his answer was no. The fact that the first word out of his mouth was no made me fucking furious, quite honestly. Like, if
I'm
you're the
with you.
manager of this team and you have no idea what's going on, then you're out of your depth and you shouldn't be there. And I say that as the biggest Naismith defender that there's been.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, he's
That's
like, I can
completely fair.
understand the frustrations. I worked in call centres for a decade. I understand your frustrations doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
Action
it's
matters. Like, we
it's
have a
true.
team that is too good to be playing this poorly. We need to do better,
Hmm.
starting with the next game, because it should have started weeks ago.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, John. And just before we kind of wrap things up for this week, I have one question for you, and I want the short, quick, snappy answer, however you want to put it. Stephen Naismith had a lot of credit in the bank for last season, finishing third and the way that we did it and all the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah, and rightly so.
Has that credit ran out?
Yes.
I'm with you.
You look at
I'm with you.
any Hearts comment section. You look at Jambo's kickback. You look at any comment section on an article about Hearts. The consensus among fans at the moment seems to be that they are done with this and they don't want him at the helm anymore. He has 0 wins since signing a new 3-year contract over a month ago. We have no wins in over a month of competitive play. We have I think we have no wins in our last 14 or something like that competitively or something like that.
That's insane. Yeah, the run is
just
ridiculous.
just
The run is
mental
ridiculous.
run. Like, it is comparable to some of the worst starts in Hearts history.
Yep.
It's the same run that Hearts were on when Nielsen was sacked, and
Yep.
Nielsen was deservedly sacked. And again, like, much like Naismith, I was an enormous Nielsen fan. I absolutely adore Robbie Nielsen, but there
Yep.
comes a time when you have to separate from your affinity for a manager and say, right, what's best for the club. And yes, it's mostly the player's fault. But like you say, yesterday he's shouting and barking instructions that are not being listened to. So while there's obviously players there that have an attitude problem, are underperforming, low in confidence, he needs to take responsibility. And if he can't take responsibility, he needs to be replaced by somebody that can. Yes, he's
Yeah.
run out of
No,
credit.
that's entirely fair. It's entirely fair. I think it's a very very interesting point to make, and
Mm-hmm.
I know I read an article from Barry Anderson earlier on today that I may or may not have sent to you. I can't remember if I did or not, but essentially it sounds as if the board are aware of the fan base discontent
Mm-hmm.
because you'd
Yeah.
have to be living on the moon to not realise it.
Yeah. The Hearts board gets a
They,
lot of stick, I think, undeservedly from Hearts fans. I
yeah,
think that they
they,
always have their finger on the pulse of what the fans are feeling. They are not reactionary, which is probably
No.
a good thing in general. But they are always listening and they care.
There needs to be a reaction now. I know we're
There
talking about
does,
they're not reactionary, and I
100%.
get that. And
Yeah.
there's parts of me, like you said it about, like, parallels with the Robbie Nielsen situation and how that went. I could understand it at that point, saying, right, do you know what, give him another little bit more time, give him a little bit more time. But we've done that consistently, and you look at things now and you go, next game after the international break, we're away to Celtic, then we're away to St Mirren, two difficult places to go, then we're at home to Ross County, then we play Minsk in the Europa Conference, and then we're away to Aberdeen. So it's an incredibly difficult run of fixtures. And right now we have a 2-week window. And I'm not saying we sack Stephen Naismith tomorrow, because personally I don't think it will happen. But this 2-week window, the board should be looking at it going, how long do we give him? Because something needs to happen. And if a new manager is what the players need to give them a kick up the arse and get them playing again, maybe that's what we have to do. But anyway, as I say, we'll speculate and we'll see what happens. There was some news earlier on today about a potential new recruit in terms of a director of football role. I saw it
Liam Jones.
Just before we came on, I saw it, and I haven't had a chance to look into it, but he's in the Scottish FA setup, quite highly regarded at that side of things, apparently.
Director of performance at the FA, and he's apparently being talked about for a role at Tynecastle. I don't know what role.
So we'll
but
see.
Maybe we need someone like him to come in as sporting director, somebody who's got obviously a pedigree of working with high class players and egos that come with that, and maybe that's what we need to kind of turn things around. How long would you give Naismith, Alan, if it was you that was in charge of the decision? Because we're not going to beat Celtic, I don't think. We'll be lucky to get 3 points out of that entire run of games that you just mentioned.
I wouldn't factor it in to the Celtic game. I think St Mirren is a difficult game, but certainly winnable. The Europa Conference is kind of a novelty at this point. So whether he's in charge for that or not, who knows? But there's definitely alarm bells ringing in my head going, right, we're back against Ross County at the end of next month. If I'm looking at that game and going, it's not happening, that's when I pull the trigger and say, right, a conversation needs to be had. Because, as I say, this 2-week period is massive. The biggest issue that I have, and the biggest annoyance that I have, is it's an international break. Lawrence Shankland's away with Scotland. Kenny Vargas is away with Costa Rica, as is Taylor. So you've got Shankland and Vargas, two players that are massively, massively misfiring at the start of this season, both going away with their countries, which maybe might not be a bad thing. If they go away, forget about Hearts for 2 weeks and come back in a better place, that might help them, and that might be the start of something that we need. But the players that are remaining in this country during the international break, they need to be at the Oriam training every single day to show that they want to play for this club and they want to make it a successful season, despite the shocking start that we've had. And if Stephen Naismith, if Stephen Naismith is the manager that they want to line up behind and they want to make sure that they turn it around for him and he helps them to turn it around, brilliant. But if not, there needs to be action from the board at that level, and we'll see what happens. There have been whispers, I've heard a few bits and pieces today, but I'm not willing to give them any sort of validity or credibility until there's arms and legs that grow in them, and at the moment that's not happened. But we will see. There may well be, when you are listening to this, there may well be some more developments that have happened in the meantime. So if there is, please feel free to drop us a note in the comments and tell us what you think. What would you do if you were the Hearts board? Would you stick with Stephen Naismith? Would you twist? Would you remove him from his position? And if you'd remove him, who do you bring in? Because something needs to change at Hearts at the moment, and hopefully for the better in the not too distant future. But yeah, I think we wrap it up there. I think it's been a nice therapy session for both of us to vent and get things off our chest. It's always nice. Sadly, it can't cure the COVID, John, but it's certainly nice to have a little bit of a rant about Heart of Midlothian Football Club. And thank you, as ever, for joining me. And as I say, we now enter a 2-week period where Hearts don't matter anymore because we're not playing a game. So if you're a Hearts fan, enjoy the next 2 weeks, and we'll see you back for the return of club football when we take on Celtic at Parkhead, and I look forward to talking about that one as well.
Good times. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Take it
Good
easy,
God.
guys. Cheerio. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.